We're building personal portfolio website in React with animations and different sections. So I'm just gonna reload the page so you guys can see the starting animations. At the top we have this header with some links to navigation and about section. Going forward, we are showcasing our skills, and as we have, I'm sure all of us have lots of skills that don't only fit in this 3-component container. That's why we have slider here, and we can add as many skills as we want. Next on, there's a list of projects, and we have different tabs here and the tab switch. In each of these tabs, we can place any content. As for the projects on the hover, we do get more information on each project. Then we have contact us callout, where users can fill out their information. This form I do have connected to the mail server, so once the users fill out the information, it does get sent to your email. And of course we have subscribe to the newsletter, so you can build your audience and the mailing list. And at the end we have these links to once again call out to our socials. As for the navigation, this is, as you can see, one page website. Since it's like a long page, as to say, to navigate in between sections, we can use this like the top navigation. So yeah, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial, and let's get started. So I just used create React app command, as you can see on the screen, to create the project, and I'm gonna name this personal portfolio. And then once it's created, we're gonna seed into it and start the application by npm start. As for the styling, I did use React Bootstrap library, so next thing we'll be doing will be installing the library as well. Bootstrap packages, and then we can run npm start. Going into the code itself, I'm on the app.js, like the main JS file. I'm gonna start off by removing all this extra code, and the first component that we'll be building would be the navigation bar at the top. So for navigation bar, as I mentioned, I'm using Bootstrap as my component library, so I'm gonna use their navigation bar, just modified. So going into source, I usually create new folder here, name it components, and this is where I'll also be placing our navigation bar. So naming it navbar.js, creating functional component. For now with no parameters, and pasting in the Bootstrap code. At the top also, when we are using Bootstrap components, we need to import them. So let's see what we need here. We need navbar from Bootstrap. We also need container. And I think that's it. Okay, let's take a look at what we have here. This is just for the color. We don't want the light one. We're just gonna give it our own color. So removing this. href, we can leave that at home. As for the brand, we can either have a name or we can have image here, which I'll be placing logo here. So image source, I'm gonna import the image into the project. So I'm gonna leave the source empty for now since I don't have it imported yet. Alt would be logo, and closing this one out. So for toggle, this is when image is on, let's leave this as this. Image is on the mobile menu when image is minimized. So for this one, I'm just gonna add our own icon. Updating this. So creating span, giving class name. For the collapse ID, this one looks good. Class name. Let's update the link. So drop down, we don't need a drop down menu for now. We're just gonna update the links here. So if you remember, we had 3 links. It was home, and then it was skills, and the third one was projects. So adding that. And then towards the other side, at the end, we also had like the social callouts. So I'm just gonna add that here. Social icon would be the name of the div container, and adding the links here. I'll leave it empty link, but obviously you can add the links to your social source. I'm also going to import the icons for this at the top, and also if you need icons, I'm adding the GitHub URL in the description, so feel free to grab them or update them as you like. So let's copy this 3 times because we have 3 links. And then at the end we had this button that would take us to the contact us form. So adding that button as well. I'm gonna give it a class name for the styling for now. On click would be just, it will console log, and then we'll add later on the functionality to actually take us to the contact us form. And let's add a span element inside that says let's connect. As for the managing like which link we are on at the moment, let's create like a class that would hold that information. So I'm gonna import useStateHook at the top, React, and then create just active link class, I mean the state. And initially this would be set at home because that's what we have at the top in the beginning. So next thing that we need is our navigation in the beginning. When the page is loaded, it was transparent, if you recall, and then towards when we start scrolling, other sections we have in black, and then in the beginning we have kind of like a background is like this cosmic image. So that's why we need to detect when user scrolls and change the color of the background. So to keep the information whether or not user has scrolled, let's create another class, name it scrolled. And also the initial state would be false, of course. And then we'll create a use effect that would determine if it's scrolled or not, and this use effect would be triggered once scroll starts. So let's have use effect, and we want this to be fired on mount. And let's create a function that will determine what happens on scroll. So let's measure if window dot scroll y position, so the height of how much has been scrolled, it's more than 50. 50 would be around the amount of our like banner that we have. We're gonna set scrolled to true. But if user has scrolled back or hasn't scrolled like 50 pixels yet, then we're gonna set scroll to false. And since this is just a function, we want to add window add event listener, which would be fired only on scroll, and then pass this function that determines what happens on scroll. Since we are adding event listener on mount, we also have to remove it when the component gets removed from the DOM. So this is what I'm doing right now, window remove event listener, and on the same event and the same function. Okay, so now that we have scrolled, we can go in the navbar, which is here, and have class name based on what condition the scroll y is at. So scrolled, let's just give it name scrolled. If it's not, then we'll leave it as it is. Also, what we need is based on which link is active, we're gonna highlight the link at the top. So in here, class name equals, so if active link equals to that specific link, we're gonna give it like an active class name. So this would be for home, for example, then active navbar link. If it's not active, then the name would just be navbar link. And we'll do the same logic for all of them, just changing their like the names in the condition. So this would be projects. And we also want the state to get updated when these links are actually pressed. So let's pass on onClick function, and in here, let's give it a name on update active link, and we're gonna declare this function at the top. It will take in the name of the link. This one would be home, and we'll do the same for the rest of them. So this one is skills, and we have projects here. Also, let's copy the name and declare it here after use effect. So constant on update active link, taking in the value and setting it as active link. Yeah, empty source link. So I already pasted all the images and logos that I'll be using throughout the project. Once again, you can get this from my GitHub project. And in assets, I have two folders. One is for the fonts and another one is for the images. If you do end up using the project on GitHub, please give it a star. Also, if you want to see more full stack applications, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the projects. Okay, so let's import this logo. So we need logo at the top and a navigation icon. So import logo from, and then just giving the path of the image, and this is in the SVG format. Also in the same way, pasting in the navigation icons. So and this would be 2, and this one would be 3. And once we have import in the source, we don't have to indicate the path anymore. We can just use this as an object that we imported. This would be 3. Okay, so replacing this with logo and replacing this ones with nav icon 1. Okay, now let's move on to styling of the page and navigation bar, and then we can see what we have. I'll be doing all of the styling in this app.css file. So first, at the top, I am going to import the custom fonts that we have in the assets folder. So custom fonts. And then this can be done using font face. So we give the font family name. This one is Centra. And then we give it a URL. So URL going back to our assets folder, assets, font, and then the name of the file. So it's this one, and font weight. So this is bold, so this would be 700. And we have 3 of them, so we'll repeat this for all 3. This is medium one. So 500, and then last one would be just regular one. And it's called book. Okay, now let's do a little bit of set a default CSS that we would be using throughout the page and also on the whole like HTML and the body. So it's a good practice to have all those like fonts and those kind of default CSS at the top. So for the whole body, setting margin and padding to both 0. And box sizing, border box. For the HTML, only thing I would be modifying is scroll behavior. I want it to have smooth. And adding scroll padding at the top. About 75 pixels. For the body, let's set the font weight to normal, 400. We don't want it to overflow on X, which means horizontally. Position relative, and let's set the background color. I set this to like a dark color. It's like a dark gray, I believe. And I'm adding important because sometimes what happens is that Bootstrap styling overrides our styling. So in some cases I have to set important. Same thing for the color. Let's set it to white. This would be the color of the text. And finally, let's set font family. So we don't have to separately set it for each component. So sans serif. And once again, this is important. Now for the headers, so in total we have what, 6 headers. So let's copy this 1, 5, 6. And let's set margin and padding to 0. And line height normal. In the styling for navigation bar, but let's go over it. So just setting a padding, position would be fixed because it is always like fixed and visible at the top. Width, we want it to like stretch fully. Top 0 because there's no anything left at the top of the screen in between navbar. Z-index, then again we set it to high number because we want it always to be visible. And transition is in, is out. This is for all the animations. So once I mentioned, this is where we use the scroll class. Once it's scrolled further down, the background color is set to dark gray, which is same as the rest of the page except the banner at the top where we have kind of like a galaxy background. For the brand, this is just for the logo, which would be 9%. This is styling for the links, nothing special, just setting some of the weights and size to 18 pixel. Also default opacity would be like 0.75 unless it's hovered or the link is active, then it would be like 1. So for the text, we're gonna center it. Then we have styling for icons here, setting the width and height, because these icons are like round, so we want the same width and height for it. Setting also the background, centering them, and giving it like a small border. This is like the icon link before styling. And transform, this is like when somebody hovers over, we want the icon to show as a little bit bigger than it is. This is the image itself. The width would not be full, it would be 40%. Setting this brightness and other how to say variables when it's hovered over. As for the button, this button is for the Let's Connect button that takes us to the contact form. And also same styling for this, like the font weight, color, adding a little bit of like border to indicate that it's a button because it's transparent. Settings the index, also button like before styling, so to make sure like nothing covers it. What else we have here? And this is the toggler icon when menu is like minimized, the icon that we have. And then if the toggler, like if the menu is expanded, we want this to rotate to 45 degrees, and then if it's closed, it would rotate to the other side. And that's it for the navbar styling. Let's see what we have now. Okay, now let's add the navigation bar to app.js file so we can actually see it on the page. So this is where app.js is. First of all, I'm gonna rename the folder name. It's not assets2, it's just assets. And let's import navbar in here. So the name of it from, and then it's in components folder, navbar. We're missing is we never imported nav from React Bootstrap, so let's do that here real quick. And also for the scroll, we did create the state, but we named it. Okay. That's weird. It was, oh, I made a typo. Okay. To actually add the Bootstrap CSS file so we do get the styling. Okay, now let's see what we have here. This looks great. We have home. On hover, we get this links highlighted, as well as this little animations on the social links and this slide on the connect button. Now let's actually work on the home banner. Okay, for the banner, I'm gonna add it in here before I create so that I don't forget later on. And this, just like any other component, this would be created inside the components folder. I know this is a little bit upside down, but at least it lets me focus on the task and finish it. So banner.js, let's create export constant banner. So we would start off with just adding some text, a little bit of like structure to it, and also the main image, and then we would move on to the, you know, the typing animation, and then when the text that gets deleted and kind of like gets rotated. So when I say, oh, hello, this is your name, and then you can list all your like your entrepreneur maybe, or different backgrounds that you have. So let's create a, since this is like a section, use HTML section tag, give it class name. It would be banner, and for ID this is home. Then taking in container from Bootstrap. Also inside container we usually have row, and inside the row we do have a column. For the row we want items to be centered, so I'll give this class name align item center, and Bootstrap would take care of the styling. And for column, for extra small, let's set it to full length. This would be the section on the left first that contains all the text, and we have two buttons, one at the top, one at the bottom. Medium, we're gonna have it half of the length, so 6. XL, let's make it bigger, 7. So starting off with the tagline, that's saying something like, welcome to my portfolio, presented to you by Web Decoded. H1 in here is where we're gonna put first our text and then our typing animation, but first I'm just gonna dump the text, and then this would be the inside the span, the text would be rotating. So class name wrap, doesn't matter what the text is. And then here let's open a paragraph. I'm just gonna paste in Lauren Ipsum, but this is where usually the about yourself goes in. And at the end, button where we have let's connect once again. For on click, I'm gonna fill it in its functionality after, so I'm just gonna leave it at console log for now. And here we have let's connect, and then we have an icon after that, like an arrow icon. For the icons, I'm also gonna be using React Bootstrap icons and install it. Installed at the top, we're gonna import the icon that we'll be using. This one is named arrow right circle. Okay, and then also one import that we are missing is the column import that goes in here. Okay, so continuing with our sections, the next column is where we have the image. This would also be about the same sizes, except for the last one. If this is 7, this has to be 5 because it adds up to 12. And image source, I'm just gonna import that in a sec, and alter alt text header image. And this one, yeah, let's add it in here. For this package, we can also set the sizes in pixels. I'm gonna give it 25. And let's import our header that goes on the right. So that would be header image from, and then the path. So it's assets, image, and then CSV, and okay, let's put it in the source here. So now that we have the UI that we'll be working with in Banner, we can move on to typing animation. For animation, we need to store different states, and we also need to have a use effect hook to detect when like user, not isn't user, when we have a typing or deleting animation. So let's import use effect and use state from React. And in here, so first we need like a list of words that we would be displaying. So I'm gonna name it to rotate. And this would be my words that I would like it to be displayed. Then next on we need to have loop number that would be set initially to 0. So this loop number would indicate like index as to which word is currently displayed on the screen. So is it this one or the other one? So use state would start from the first word, obviously. And then we have is deleting state, which is either set true or false. That means that is the word being typed out or being deleted, on the other way around. So initially this is set to false because we start by typing the word. So this one, current text, this our, like the component needs to know what text we're showing right now. So text set text. So this would only indicate like the portion of the word that is being displayed. So starting off, let's say we start with W, then WE, B, and etc. And the constant period, this would kind of like arbitrarily indicate how much time passes between one extra letter being typed out. Now we have use effect where we're gonna run this function that will be responsible for taking care of like typing or deleting. So let's name this function ticker and then set interval. So this would be the interval in between the text would get updated. And for this one, let's add another state. So let's name it delta. This would actually be a state. So and we can also have this somewhat like random. So math.random. But it's not gonna be like higher, very far from like 300. And the way we would use this is, so period would be amount of time between like each transition between each words, and then we're gonna use delta to determine how fast one letter comes after the first one is typed. And also one thing to note, when some like the word would be getting deleted, it would be getting deleted faster than typed out, because that's the naturally when somebody is deleting it goes faster. So tick and then delta would be our interval when the tick is getting fired off. Once again, we need to, once we set the interval and component unmounts, we need to clear it. So I'm gonna pass in the function in here to clear that interval, and that contains the ticker. And this use effect we wanted to run every time the text gets updated. Okay, and then let's actually define the tick function. So constant tick equals so I would be the index as to like from the array we're currently picking, and the reason is that is loop number is constantly increasing. So once we go over this, the size of this is 3, loop number would be set 4, but we don't have 4th element, so we want to go back to the first element here. Okay, and then this would be to rotate length, so basically like calculating the modulus. And so the full text, we need to keep also track of that. So that would be to rotate and then ith element. And this is the future, like the text to be updated, what we will set to. So if the current state is deleting, then we'll take the full text and get its substring. So one letter less than the current number of letters. And then if it's not deleting, then we do the other way around, which is we add one letter to make the current text come closer to the full text. And this is also where we update the state to our updated text. And we have to determine if is deleting. As I mentioned, the pace would be different. So we're gonna update the delta, and compared to previous delta, we're gonna take that one and cut it into half. And we also have to check if we finished typing out the words. So if we're not deleting right now, and also we got to the point where updated text equals to full text, we need to set is deleting to true, and also set delta back to its like normal pace. Then we have another scenario where else if it is deleting and we got to the point where the text became completely deleted, so it's empty, then we need to set is deleting to false. Also, we need to update the loop number because we need to move on to the next text, right? So loop number +1, and set delta 500. Okay, so that would be all of our cases. And going back here, I just hard-coded the text. So let's update this and actually display what we have in terms of text. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Oh, as you can see, there's this like typing animation. I'm just gonna add the space in here. Okay, and then this looks a little bit weird because we haven't added any styling yet, but we're about to do that. And let me just add a space in here. Okay, so for the banner CSS, I also pasted in here because it's like a lot of repetition and just like setting the same things, and typing out this would like take a good portion of the video. So, but like let's quickly go over it. So no margin at the top, just setting some padding. For the background image, I used this image and like positioned it, make sure it's the cover. This is for the tagline that comes above the about text. It's like linear gradient, kind of looks like a button. Just to make it look nice, I set some of the colors for the gradient. Then we have H1, then we have P text. This is the button for like the let's connect, and styling afterwards of this SVG that follows the button. Also a little bit of margin left because the arrow kind of moves towards the right, so we add this margin. And this is the keyframes. This is for, if you recall, the image on the right is like bouncing up and down, so that's what it basically does. The wrap, this is the typing text. At the end, we kind of want the same line as you can see when I'm like clicking on the text, right? So we created that line using the border, right? And that's it. Let's move on to, now we have skill section. For the skills section, I do have a carousel, and this is the package that I use for it. So just ping it and paste it in here. Okay, let's create a new component for the skill. So just gonna name it skills.js, export constant skills, and let's add into app.js. skills, and it goes below. We're actually following the order, so every new component would be below the previous one. And here in the skills, as I mentioned, we're using React multi-cursor, so I'm just gonna paste some of the default stuff that they have here. So at the top we need import statements, and then they have this responsive like controls that you can obviously customize it, but I'm just gonna use what they have default. And only thing that I would update here, no, actually on the desktop I do want 3 items, so I'll just leave it as it is. And let's start building out the components. So return, this is a new section. Once again, a class name would be skill, and then ID would be skills. And let's have a container as well as the row and the column. So making sure that all of these elements are being imported in the Bootstrap. Sometimes VS Code, the extension that I have, does it automatically. Sometimes it does not work. And let's create a class for where we will store our skills. So that would be skill box. And let's give it a header skills once again, and here I'll just put Lauren Ipsum text. Okay, pasting that in here. Now we have the header description, and let's create the carousel. We need to pass in the responsive config that we just declared. So responsive. As for other settings, I want infinite true, so it could like go around, come back, and also give it a class name that would be skill slider. And here we create each of the items. I'm just gonna do a few of them. Class name would be item, and each item has an image source. I'm gonna import them at the top. Alt description, image, and then we had like a title of the project. So header 5 web development. And that was all that item contained. Yeah, let's copy this. I have this 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Also, let's just change names. This can be brand. And I'm going to import the images at the top. So we have meter 1. So that happens 3 times, 2 and 3. And then one more image I'm gonna import is I have a little bit of like a gradient circle at the corner of this, like the skill section. So I'm gonna import that as well and put it in the class name. So images. and add that in the end. Class name, so I can update the styling, color sharp. It doesn't have that much of styling, so I'm just gonna type them out. So let's comment it first that this is for skills section. And so first goes the main container, which was skill. We're gonna adjust the paddings. It would only have on one side. Position would be relative. Then the next inside skill, we have skill box. We're gonna set like almost black background for this one. So 151515. Border radius 64 pixels. Text align, we want it to be in the center. Some padding. And margin, we wanted to push out at the top. Now for the skill title, I think we actually used H5. Okay, so this would be H5. Font size, it's a pretty big one. And weight would also be kind of like a bold. And P, that was for the the paragraph description. So it's almost white, font size 18 pixels, letter spacing, line height 1.5 rem, margin now we got to the slider part, and width would be 80%. As you recall, it was like not full width, and then it was centered. So margin, not this one, margin would be 0 auto, and position relative. For the images, we're gonna do half width, so width 50 pixels, and then they would also be centered. 0 auto, 15 pixel auto. And lastly, the gradient, like a circle that I mentioned, we're gonna style that. This one would be like just position absolute, because it's not really part of this container. Background image left. So top 28%. Position of this one, absolute, like I mentioned. So it would be positioned towards the bottom. The width would be only 40%, and then say index, we would set it to -4 so that it doesn't cover the actual main component. Okay, so now let's see what we have. First of all, that is our animation here, and going towards the scale we have, oh my god, those titles are actually huge. Okay, I'm gonna make them smaller, but here we have our slider. So let's, yeah, I don't think we need this. Oh, this was for the actual title of the section, not the, yeah, okay, so this is definitely better. Now we are gonna build the projects part. Okay, once again, creating new component, projects.js. And let's might as well add it into app.js. So projects, we obviously are gonna have like a list of projects. So what I'm gonna do is at the top kind of create like a constant that's gonna hold information about the projects. And we need 3 kinds of information. This is title, description, and image URL. So let's create an array that will hold objects that, okay, I pasted, we don't need this extra line. So it would hold the objects that contain these 3 variables. And let's build out the component itself. So starting off the section, class name, project. Same goes for the ID. Once again, we need container, React Bootstrap, row and column. And let's give it a header, which would be projects. Once again, in here we have Lorem Ipsum. Tabs, we're gonna use the React Bootstrap tabs component. They have different versions of it. We want something most similar to this one, and then we'll just like copy. Actually, I'm just gonna copy this inside and then modify it. So it goes after the navigation item. Oh, and then this we can, so we have 3 items. We're gonna change, instead of hrefs, we're gonna give it event key. So event key, first one is like just the first tab. And this is second. We don't want a disable tab, so let's modify this to third. Oops. And also changing the names, just saying like tab 1, tab 2, and tab 3. Okay, and then we're gonna wrap this into tab container. So ID of this would be just projects tabs, and we also set the default active key, which would be the first one. This is more customized tab than they offer, because we want to be able to not only have text inside the content, but place other contents, for example, like the projects cards in there. So let's wrap this in tab container, and this is where we define the tab content. So starting off with first pane, so as in what would be displayed on the first tab, and for each, so we want to obviously map the buttons to panes, right? So first one would be event key first, second one second, and etc. So event key first, and so create row, and then this is where we would place all the project cards. So let's take the projects list like the constant we created and then map it out. So for each project and index, let's just return project name, project title first before we create the card. And let's do other sections. So tab.pane event second and third one. For this ones, I'm just gonna put like just a contact text, but you can place whatever you'd like in here. Okay, so now let's create project cards. For this one, I'm gonna create like a new component and then I'll use that to like map it out here. So component, new file, project, just card.js. So for the project card, it actually takes in a couple of components and a couple of arguments. And as you remember, the project had 3 fields. So we do need to use all these 3 fields. So title, description, and image URL. Return. So yeah, let's create like a column. That's where we're gonna place this card, and on the small one, let's give it a 6. On medium size is 4, so we're gonna have on average 3 cards per row. So now let's create a new class name project image box, and have image at the top. So it's not really at the top, it kind of like covers the whole card, and then we have the text on hover. But that one, we don't have to actually do it in any specific order. We can update this using CSS in either way. So header 4, let's use it to display title. And just a regular span for the description. Okay, and then here at the top, I didn't import, so we're using column here, so we also need to import this from Bootstrap. Okay, so this should be fine, and let's import that here. So project card from project card, and instead of just title. Also, when we're mapping things out, unless we indicate unique key, we're gonna get a warning. So let's say key equals index, and then for the rest of the fields, we can use like this rest, like the spreader, and pass all the props like that. Also, I have another gradient on the other side, so I'm just gonna add that image in here. So this would be, instead of background image, right in this case. And I have to also import the source at the top. So the source would be color sharp, let's just say number 2. So we don't mix it up. Assets, image, color, sharp 2. Okay, and then let's copy the name and paste it in here. Otherwise, if we have empty source, we're gonna get an error. For projects, I am also going to paste in the CSS here. And I guess the only thing you should note in this CSS is that some of the things are basic, like setting the font sizes and weights. And as for the tabs, I did create like not transparent, like for the active tab we have gradient background, so that is set in here. And then for the first one we have a little bit of different styling for each tab. That's why we gave it like unique IDs. And unique IDs because the border is, so the whole container contains like a rounded border, so that's why we had to set this radiuses on like different sides differently. And I think, yeah, that's pretty much it for the text. Yeah, we wanted it to be exactly centered over the image once it's visible. So on hover, its opacity would be set to 1, not on hover it would be 0, so it would not be displayed. So we have left contact form, newsletter, and footer, and we're done. Okay, so we have some errors. I probably did not import something correctly, so this is in projects.js file, so let's just go and see. One of the imports that was missing was the row component from Bootstrap, so let's just add here. And yeah, for the images that I'm using, we do need to import them as well, and these are once again coming from images, like the folder. So assets, image name is project image 1. And I think there's three of them, so it's going to copy this 3 times. Okay, we should be good now. If there's also the nav, we need to add this at the top. Anything else? Tab, we do have tab, row, column. Okay, should be good now. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so we have the project section and then just the tabs here. The hover on the project card itself. Only thing I'll add padding in between like this too, because it's looks like it's very crowded. In between the navigation item and tab content. So yeah, let's have a class name. Also default key is not home, this is active. Actually, we already have default active key defined here, so we can remove this and give a class line navigation peels, margin 5, and let's do also justify content. It did already look centered, but just in case. And ID would be peels tab. Okay, so now moving on to our next section, which is the contact form. So let's create a new file. And the component for this one. So what we need here is we're gonna have a few fields in the form, right? And then we need to have a state to store these fields. So let's store them using the useState hook. And let's declare like the initial default state. So that would be form initial details. And this would list all the fields we're gonna have, but they're gonna be just empty. So first name, let's do last name. Also the email, phone number, and the message. And let's create a state that would store all these details. So form details set form details equals use state form initial details. And then we're gonna also use this, I guess, initial details constant to reset the form later on. And as for the submit button, it would be initially set to send, but when user presses send, it would update to like sending, so the user knows that once they took the action, the API call actually was triggered. And the status would be once we make the API call afterwards, whether or not we get error message or if our message has been sent successfully. This is what I'm gonna use to update that, but initially, of course, before a user has sent anything, it would just be an empty object. So yeah, let's start creating the form. We still are going to wrap this in a section and give it its name contact, also the ID connect. This we need to have the ID to navigate in between pages, right? Not in between pages, in between sections from the top header. And let's have a container, also row and the column. And we want everything centered, so class name, align item centered. This should not be plus equal sign. So for column medium, we're just gonna set this to 6. And on the left, if you recall, we just had an image. So image source would be, let's import that now. So it was contact image from and adding that source in here. Also alt text would be contact us. Okay, now that we have image on the left, let's add another column which would be placed on the right, and that would actually contain the form. So this and setting header and creating form in here. So for every row, we're gonna have 1 or 2 fields each, starting off with first one. We have like first name, last name. This one on the small, let's make it 6. So for two, if we have 2 columns, it's just gonna take the same space. And let's also give like padding, so that would be first one, second one, and now the input. So input type equals text. For the value, so this would be form details dot first name placeholder. Since we don't have labels on top, I'm just gonna use like placeholders. And on change, we want to update our state. So event on form update. So we're gonna pass category. So first name, like the field name, and target value, so the value that user put in. And I'm gonna declare this function. So constant on form update, it contains category value, and it updates the form details state that we have. So it leaves the rest of the details intact, only updates the field that we have indicated in the arguments and value. Okay. So let's close this out. Yeah, we don't need anything else. I'm also gonna move this so we have more space. And same thing for the other one, but only difference is that this would be last name. Okay, so following like the same patterns for email and phone number, only difference in those cases, in addition to like the names of the values, would be the type. So we're gonna have email type and telephone. Here, phone, placeholder update. And lastly, we have a field. This is a bigger one, so I'm just gonna place it on the whole column. This would be for the message. So text area, how many rows? We set it to 6. Value equals to form details dot message. Placeholder would also be message. And same function on the onChange. And lastly, we have the button that would be responsible for submitting all this like information. So button, we set the type here equals to submit, and the text inside it. So this would be button text, because as I mentioned, this is a variable because it gets updated from send to sending, back to send. And also, in case we get an error or the message is sent successfully, we need to display that. But before user takes any action, this would not be displayed. So status message, another column. So paragraph, class name, based on what the status is. So status.success. This will set to true if it's successful, and then false if it's not successful. So if it's false, the class name would be danger, and if not, success. For the styling of this, I already did update in the default part in app.css, and would also set the status message so user knows what's going on. Yeah, after that we close out the form. We have the row. So now we need to pass and create the submit function. So let's say at the top of the form we're gonna have, also let's create the function first, constant handle submit. And where's the form? For here, on submit handle submit. For now, to actually be able to like send this information, we need to use like a mail server. The one that I used is node mailer. And to set that up, you need 3 packages. So those 3 are course, express, and node mailer. So just run npm install express course node mailer. And so the way we would set this up is we're going to create a new file inside our project. So let's just say here server.js, and I'm gonna paste some of the configurations from the node mailer package itself, which I modified according to like my configurations and what fields I'm using. So let's go over the let's go over the file. At the top we just declare use all this like modules that we just installed, and we set up like a server, and we have to, it like runs on port 5000. So if you go to your browser, localhost 5000, it should be running there, but we haven't started it yet. So the way you can run is you can go in terminal to your project root, and you can run npm server. So that should run this file. And then depending on what service you have, so I use Gmail, so I indicated Gmail in here. This is to like set up a way to send this email. You have to pass your username, and then for the password, depends on what, again, email carrier you're using. For Gmail, it does not let you use your personal password, because it won't let you use your personal password if you have 2-factor authentication on, because there's no way that it can verify. So what you have to do is you'd go to your account security, and then over there you'd have application password, and you can create application password and use it in here. And this is just when you're running, just to verify if it's running. And then as for the contact, so the way we would send this data is that we would make a post request to our created like API URL, and then dash, so on port 5000/contact. And then this post request would take in the request, and the body would have all these fields that we want to pass, and we created in the form. The way we would pass it, so from name, this would combine the first name and the last name. To this here, once again, in your email, so it would get sent to you. Subject could be anything you can modify, and then for HTML, same thing. You might not need all this fields. And then at the end, we send back, if it's an error, we send back the error. If it's successful message, I send back this code of 200, which means the status is okay and the message has been sent. So yeah, let's save this. Let's go back to the contact form and submit. So since we're making a request to API, this is like asynchronous method, and prevent default. So we don't want page to get reloaded when user submits the form. That's why we're saying prevent default. So let's submit button, set button text to sending to indicate that something has been like triggered and user just needs to wait. So then let's get a response by from the API call to what we had just set up. So like I said, the server that we set up would be running on localhost 5000, and the path is contact. And I'll pass the URL that it's like a post method, and let's set the headers. So we have content type, that's application JSON, parset tf8, and also we need the body. So body would be, and always body needs to be like a string. So we're gonna take our object, stringify it, And that is it. So form details is our object, and once this is done, we're gonna set button text back to send. We also are waiting for the response in JSON format, so response.json. And we're gonna also set form details back to initial state. So we want to clear the form, and then we're gonna process the response back. So if result code equals to 200, then we have a successful API call. Set status, so we're gonna set status success to true, and then message to message sent successfully. If that is not the case, then we're gonna set status success to false, and like a error message, something like, you know, something went wrong, please try again later. Subscribe to the newsletter component. I did use this React MailChimp subscribe package, so let's go ahead, install this and set it up. Like as the name of the module suggests, for this service to work, you do need a MailChimp account. I have one. I have like a free one. I think it's up to a certain amount of emails that you can send and subscriber list that you can use. But there's other services. I know the SendGrid is a good one you can use, and I know that they probably have also like developer tutorials over there, so how to use it. But for the MailChimp, I'll show real quick. You first need to create like a sign up form, and then you're gonna use some of the variables from the sign up form into our application, and we're gonna plug it into our module. So real quick, going to audience, sign up forms, there use form builder or embedded forms. I think I did form builder. So, and then basically after that, what you're gonna do is copy the sign up form URL that it gives you and paste it in a new tab and do inspect element. On the form, it only has like one field, so at the top of the form there would be action. I like X'd it out, so you need all the three values that I did put X's on. So we need the URL, we need the input name value, and then the ID value, and we're gonna move these values to the env file. While we are at subscribe newsletter part, please subscribe to my newsletter. I'm also gonna include the link in the description. I'm just getting started, so maybe you won't get any emails from me in the next couple of weeks, but I'm working on the content and it will be there. It will be news basically about web development, new frameworks around React, TypeScript, and etc. Okay, so let's go back to our project. As you can see, this is the MailChimp subscribe module, like a default configuration. We're gonna use custom forms since we're building our own form, and we need to take in the URL and pass it into the form. And yeah, let's import this at the top. So let's create new component. This would be kind of like a wrapper of our custom form. So I'm gonna name it MailChimp form.js. So importing MailChimp at the top, and then later on I'm gonna import our custom form. So export constant MailChimp form. So this is where we have to generate the URL that we're gonna pass on. And I'm going to be using environment variables to set this. So process.env. So we're gonna have three of them: React app, MailChimp URL, and then we have, so this was the first URL that we saw in like post action equals and then URL that post dash subscribe, something like that. So then the next one that we saw, we're gonna use that in here. React app MailChimp and I think the last one is the ID, so and ID equals to okay, and then for this files, like we're gonna create like a new env file. So for example here, and then paste it in. So here you'll just put whatever URL you copied from your form, and the same thing for like all these fields. And the last one. So yeah, make sure not to forget to fill this in. And moving forward, let's get the form. So return, we have MailChimp subscribe, and the URL is post URL. Then we render. So this, all this like values in here that are destructured, we do have access to them inside the form. So we can use them to display messages, status, and etc. And yeah, now let's create the form in here. I'm gonna leave it empty until we have the form. So I think I'm missing some. Oh, I didn't close out MailChimp subscribe. Okay, so creating new component, newsletter.js, and yeah, export constant newsletter, and we saw the 3 fields that we're getting, so let's just copy those in here. Return. Let's create column. And this is gonna take the full width, so I'm just gonna set it to large, and let's create a class name. This would be newsletter box. So row, another column. So 2 columns, one for the input, one for the submit. So this would be also a long one, but on like medium screens, let's make half of the width, and then it would be a small one for like a smaller, bigger desktop. So first we have a header here that says subscribe to our newsletter. So then in here, we're gonna show an alert based on what the status is. So there's, coming from the module, I know that there's like 3 statuses that they have. So it's sending, error, and success. So first sending, we're gonna have alert, which is like a bootstrap component. Variant for this one, we're not gonna set, we're just gonna use the default variant. So sending, and let's copy this, paste it 2 times. So another scenario where we have an error. So this is where we do want to set a variant, and that would be danger. And also we're gonna have like an error message, so we're just gonna display that error message. Then again, this field is coming from here. And same thing for this one, we do want to show the message. Variant would be success, and this value would also be success. Okay, so moving on to the form itself, also on medium, let's make it this big, like half of the size, and 7 for the large ones. And let's create the form. On submit, we're gonna create handle submit. So let's have that here, handle submit. We're gonna come back to it. Let's first add the fields in the form. We actually do have like one field only, so let's have just another container. So new email box, and then our field. So input value equals, let's create a class to store this value. So for this one, import use state hook, and constant email set email use state default just empty string. So value of this would be email, and same like the type as well. And then on change, we're gonna update the state. So get event set email event target value. Placeholder would also be like something that says email address. And finally the submit button. So type is submit, and it does say submit as well. So now we do have to work on the handle submit function. So first again, event prevent default. Then we do check if email has actually been entered, and kind of like if email index of, so if it contains like the @ sign. So if we can find this, then, oh, and another function that we do get passed, instead of subscribe, we're gonna use onValidated. So this basically validates the forms that we pass. So the type of the form is email. So this is the function that's coming from the module that we are using. So once that's good, then we're good to go. One more thing is that we need to clear the fields. So this only happens if message email has been sent successfully. So set email empty, and then we're gonna make use of use effect. So basically if it fails to send it, then user can try again, right? So in that case, we don't want to clear the fields. So we're just gonna keep it on successful message. So yeah, let's create this, and then this would be triggered every time the status would be updated. But inside we're gonna have another check that says if status equals to success, only in that case clear the fields. And so here let's import at the top newsletter that we just created, and instead of this let's pass newsletter, and the field. So status would be status, same for the message. As for the unvalidated, it does need to take the form data first. And then subscribe. So I did try this on my account, and then once you go to the MailChimp, you have, once you press context, that's where the email is gonna show up. So I have a typo here. This should be form data. So now we're gonna move on to the final part, which is footer. And for this one, we are also, so we're gonna actually include newsletter in the footer. They kind of like overlap each other. So that's why I didn't add the newsletter in the app.js. So creating footer. So let's make use of footer HTML tag, class name, give it footer. Let's create a container, row inside of it. For the class name, we're gonna just make sure the items are aligned. And here we can import our MailChimp wrapper for the form that already contains the form. Oh, not this one, MailChimp form, this one. And so on the footer on the right, we're gonna just have a logo. So column, the small one, size 6. And inside here, image source equals to importing the logo at the top. So import logo from so that would be logo, alt text logo. Okay, and then next part we have for the socials. So this one also on the small 6. And class name. So the text, we do want it to be centered, but on the small one we wanted to move it to the end. So creating that here, and the container for the socials, that would be social icon. This is where you'd indicate the link to your own social URLs, and inside each one of them we're gonna also have icons. And importing the same icons that we had in the header, so this ones. So just copying and pasting them in here. So nav icon 1. So I believe one I added for LinkedIn, one is for Facebook maybe, I'm not sure. And then we have the typical, copy, write, reserved message. All rights reserved, and here you can say bye and then maybe your company name or just your name. Okay, now let's add footer to the app.js file and see how it looks like. We still haven't done styling for it, so we're gonna do that after we add it here. So footer, and at the end. Okay, now I'm gonna open this side by side. Okay, so we're missing definitions from Bootstrap, so we need row, column, So that we're good for footer. About newsletter, let's see what's going on there. Once again, row column, E is not defined. So E, I believe, is for the event. It's online. Oh, because we never passed it. Okay, that should be good now. Let's see. So yeah, this is our footer with the logo, email. There's a submit button, probably can't see it, and our logos. So let's go back to app.css and do the styling for the footer. So I'm just gonna comment it out here. So starting off with the main footer component first, let's add some padding to it. So it would be at the top, on the right it would be 0, and then from the bottom it's gonna have a 50 pixels of padding. Let's also add background image. So URL for this would be coming from assets folder, image, and the name of the image that I have for that one is footer BG for big. Now background position, so we want it center both on the horizon centered. Background size, we want it to cover. As for the repeat, we're gonna set it to no repeat. Now moving on to the newsletter container, that was newsletter box. Let's set it to background. So this one would be white, so FFs. And like we want it to have rounded corners, so for that border radius 55 pixels. And then this is for color of the text. This would be the dark gray. Also setting some padding, that would be 85 pixels, 125. Let's see. So also this is gonna have margin from the bottom, which would be 80 pixels, and then margin top would be -22. So this kind of like over these two containers like overlay. So we're gonna set the Z index also, so that this is not covered from the component that's top of it. And then this is the background image, it's just a gradient spot. So now let's do the newsletter header. So that one had H3. Just making it bold, that would be 700. Letter spacing 0.5 pixels. And setting some line height 1.2 em. Now for the input box itself, that would be new email BX. So background of this one is also white. Then we have a little bit of padding of 5 pixels. This is also rounded corners, but not as much. Position is relative. Say index is 0. Display we have not inline, it's gonna be flex. And we want it to center. So now setting the styling for the before element. So we make sure that the content, nothing covers the content before. So setting content to empty. And then this is where we set the background to like linear gradient, and this is some coordinates that I'm pasting in when I built the image. So 37C. So this is also border radius of also 20 pixels. Position, this is absolute. So, oops. The index, this would be -1. So top would be -1 pixels. Same for the left. And bottom and right. Interesting. So we have the same styling for before, except of the linear gradient. So so we have the same styling for after, except the linear gradient background. The background is just going to be white. So I'm gonna paste this in and modify this to be, oops, FFF. So border radius, position absolute, the index, top, and then this ones we're gonna update to be 0. Okay, so now styling for the input itself, because in here we can't see the input. So let's say new email box input. So width, we do want it to be 100%. Color would be also dark gray, so that's total 12. Font weight, it's regular. And background is transparent. Border, we set it to 0, and then padding goes like 0 and 15 pixels for the sides. Now for the button, that would be just the name and the button. So this one we have background linear gradient, so just gonna copy the same gradient that we have here. By the way, let me know in the comments what tool do you guys use to pick and generate like this gradients and paste it in like CSS. So then we set the padding to 20 pixels, 75 on the sides. Color of the text would be white, so FFF. Font weight, same as we have for the input, 500. Letter spacing would be 0.5 pixels. Border radius 18 or 19, it could be, was the same. Now, so for the footer, oh, you guys can see. Okay, so for the footer image, let's say set the width to 26%, and for the footer, the paragraph, the text that we have in there, font weight would be 400, size of the font would be 14 pixels, color, this would be this one, we used it before, B8, letter spacing 0.5 pixels, and margin top so that it's not very close to the input and the newsletter. Projects is kind of still overlapping our newsletters, so I'm just going to, let's see, update maybe the padding of the projects and then it's the index. So if we do make this maybe 120 and then set it to the index -1. Okay, So now we have the newsletter. I'm gonna update the same for app.css file. So, oops, project. Now that we have all the components built out for the page, we can add some animations to bring in some drama and effects to our page. So the module that I used to enable this kind of like different effects is animate CSS, as it says, for attention seekers. So there's a list of different things that you can do with CSS. I mainly use like maybe fade in, fade out. I do have one bouncing and sliding, but I'll show you how we can set up one, and then based on that you can add it on any component and whichever effect you like. So for that we'll add this module. And another thing about just in general animations is that if you set it up for it to play when the HTML is loaded, it would actually do that. But since we have one page application and when the page loads, the other parts are not visible, so we want the animations to kick off when user is actually able to see them. So to enable that, I also added React on screen module. So this will help us detect, oh, this component is on screen. Let's kick off with the animation. So let's install both of these modules and get started with it. For animate CSS, we need to import it in the files that we'll be using. I can also import it in the main file, but since I'll only use it as an example in banner.js, so that's where I'm gonna import it. So we have animate CSS, and for tracking the visibility, the way this works is also we import this track visibility in the same file. And so this basically is a wrapper, so component that you want to be aware whether or not it's displayed on the screen or not. So you put that component inside this wrapper, and then this is visible variable is being passed, and it's set to true when the component is visible. So let's import that at the top as well. And the component that I'm going to animate in here, that would be let's see, let's do welcome to my portfolio and all this, like this section basically. So whatever is inside here. So that's where I'm gonna put my wrapper, track visibility, and this one goes after this, and let's wrap all this in a div. So the reason I am wrapping this in a div is because I'm gonna add some styling on the div for like animations. So let's see, for the class name, this is where our is visible variable comes in. So if it is visible, then we do want to, did something get, oh no, we don't want, this is for testing. Yeah, Aromat got imported. So if is visible, for class name, let's set animated. So this names that you're seeing is coming from the animate module. So any file, so any effect that we want, we're gonna start with animate, and then this, and then we're gonna replace this portion of it. So that's what I'm doing right now, fade in. But if it's not visible, then we don't want any animations, so we're gonna leave it as empty. So now how are we getting this is visible? That is also coming from the track visibility. So first we need to wrap all this in here, and then we need to destructure, because I believe they have other variables as well, and we can wrap our component in here. So now we do have access to is visible. So let's Okay, everything looks good. Let's go ahead and test this. I'm gonna reload the page, maybe have it set on skills. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see, but when I'm reloading and when it first appears on the page, you can see this animate fading class gets added to it, and once we scroll down and it's no longer visible, it disappears. Let's do one for the projects as well, and then for the rest, you can set it to any of the components. We want to animate in here. Let's do this just projects and the description. So wrapping this in a div. Actually, we can paste. So copying this, pasting it in here, but instead of fading, I'm gonna do slide in up just to switch it up, and closing this div out in here. Also the track visibility. Okay. Okay, now let's go test this. So I'm just gonna reload the page. So starting off here, once we get to the projects, this should be, let's see. Okay, animated slide. Okay, so this is visible, this gets disappeared. I don't see the animations itself, so we did import animate CSS at the top, so that should take care of it. Wondering if I'm missing something else. Install with CDN, yeah. Maybe let's check the name if I spelled it correct. Okay, let's try bounce. Okay, so you can see, yeah, I guess my spelling was wrong. So yeah, that's our animations. Let's also update the spelling for this one. Animate. Okay, so you can see we have the fading. Alright, thank you so much guys for watching this. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Let me know in the comments if you have personal portfolio already, or if you build something using this tutorial. How does it look like? I can also offer maybe just my own feedback on your portfolio, what should be included for the recruiters or etc. So yeah, let me down in the comments, and if you want me to review your personal portfolio website more in detail, and if you want to get feedback also from others, I'm gonna include a link to my Discord channel in the description, so please make sure to check it out and join.